Hello, my name is Sam Jenks. I am making this video for my senior capstone class about story structure. This project is for um, industry, industry research, and you had asked us to record a video about something that we thought was interesting that we researched and had some knowledge on. So I would like to talk about story structure. I apologize if you hear my cat in the background. He's running around, and this is maybe not a great angle, an up angle on my face, but this is not a cinematography class, so let's just go for it. But anyway, I love story structure. I think story structure is maybe one of the most fascinating topics to me. It just the idea of these rules or um, pieces of information about how we like to write the patterns that we use to form stories that become memorable and meaningful is really interesting to me. Like, how do you can I like to think about stuff like, can any story be interesting if you tell it in the right way? You know, like, can you make any mundane thing something that someone wants to look at if you do it well enough? And I think the answer to that question is actually yes. When I took a story structure class, it totally blew my mind and really made me want to know more about this stuff. And I realized how broad the topic is and how difficult it is to go about learning story structure, deciding what kind of writing you want to do from a young age. So some of the research I did was on the different types of story structure that I either wanted to go into when I was younger or just was a big fan of. I have had a big circuitous pattern or cycle, I guess you could say, of switching between wanting to do animation work and like live film type stuff. When I was young, I wanted to do animation, and then recently I am getting a major in film and television, but I'm actually thinking about going back into animation. And this has been really interesting for me because there are so many different types, or there are very distinct types of formatting for writing and structure for whether it be episodic animation or, you know, feature length films, or all of those things are written very differently. I remember when I was a kid, I was just emulating what I saw, really. So I remember my first short animated film was a lesson in biting off more than I could chew. And I've continued to learn that lesson, but in smaller increments, I guess, over time. Where the first animated film that I ever made was it was like part one of a prologue of a whole, what I wanted to be a whole series. And it was only it was 3 minutes long. But so simultaneously, it was a snapshot of a story that was too big. And so the scope of the film itself was actually too small because it didn't encompass enough of the story. But actually, the length of the film was too long because I had never made anything before, and making a 3 minute long animation is like really, I mean, it kind of takes a lot. I didn't need 3 minutes is the point. And as I started learning about story structure, I started learning just how much you can get across visually in a very, very short amount of time. So studying film has taught me how valuable a minute's worth of time is. For example, like with all of the animation got me interested in storytelling. Studying film made me better at understanding the economics of cinematography and storytelling. So why would you say something in dialogue that you could show with a couple quick cuts? Why would you waste time and attention having a character speak something that you could just show much more quickly? And not to mention, I mean, a lot of the writing I'm talking about, especially when you're going into when you're thinking about it in terms of animation, it's writing that happens behind the scenes, in the sense that, like, it never you're not writing dialogue only that is gonna tell the story. what you want your writing to do is to plan how you can get the information across in the best way possible as quickly as possible, or how, whatever purpose you're trying to serve with telling that information in a concise, interesting way that doesn't muddy up their film with a bunch of random talking. So that's something that I definitely learned with film, because it just became very clear to me that I don't like talking films. As funny as that sounds, I get extremely bored with dialogue really quickly. So unless it's good dialogue, I tend to just get really I don't like it. I don't watch a lot of dramas, specifically dramas, straight up dramas without any other sort of genre mixed in, because it has to be like really interesting for me. That's just my opinion. But my point is, I discovered how with different structures of writing, you can get a lot done in a very short amount of time, and how valuable it is to not waste space, basically. Another thing that I learned is that I think one of the most valuable things that I learned in my study of story structure and what I've learned at DePaul is the idea of the microcosm. So like a scene is a microcosm of a sequence, which is a microcosm of an act, which is a microcosm of the whole story. So the idea is that if you can't tell a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's structured and it makes sense and it has resolution and all of that, if you can't tell a story like that in 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, then it's basically, there's no point in trying to make something that's much, much longer than that. I mean, not to say that you would do the same story for both, but my point is you have to be able to effectively do a scene that has all of the elements of a full story before you can start connecting that into other scenes, other small stories, and making it into a larger narrative. So when I had that initial failure with the animated short that had a problem with scope and time and whatnot, I really was like, okay, so this is a game. Filmmaking for me as an individual is a game where you are trying to go for, time, your ability to execute, and quality, but mostly it's the first two things, because quality is gonna suffer if you don't have any equipment and you don't have any time and you don't have any know-how. But if you work really hard on the first two things, being like, what can I get done and how long do I have it to get done, and you have your structure, then hey, it doesn't have to be that long. That's sort of the thing, is that you don't have to, if you know the structure, you don't have to spend so much time in terms of how long the film is. You'll want to spend a lot of time writing it and thinking it out and drawing storyboards and stuff, but it doesn't have to come out to be a long, boring film. So I've had a number of my own long, boring films as well. And because at one point I had to learn the lesson that dialogue can't deliver the story either. That's a lesson that I learned pretty soon into being a live action film student. I had a couple films that were very dialogue heavy, and I decided that I hated that. And so recently what I've been on to, as I've been coming back to animation, I have been really liking the idea of doing stories with no dialogue whatsoever, with no words even, if I can. If I can avoid showing a picture of a sign even that has words on it, or like a text message or a phone call or something, I don't want to do any of that, because I think it's really fun to test myself and to see how much story I can inject without any of the dialogue or anything. And all of that is the culmination of me being fascinated with story structure. Like, I really do think it's incredible. Literature is amazing, but the fact that I can make a film and have it be universally understood by people who speak different languages even, I mean, that's incredible to me. And there's something about the visual information that sticks in my brain more, for example. Like, if you can convey something emotional to me or something that has meaning in just an image, it really is impactful. And I think that is one of the most important. You can say every film student knows that you're not supposed to tell a whole story with dialogue, but the amount of depth and detail that there is in that well of information of like how can you visually convey information, it's so dense, and I will probably never be done learning about it. But the more I learn about different types of stories, whether it's like extremely economical, quick-witted, dialogue in like a sitcom, for example, or something that is more artsy and maybe less focused on dialogue, like I don't know, There Will Be Blood. That's an Stalker. Okay, those are two movies that are less interested in dialogue specifically, but learning about the different types of writing really helps me understand. It helps me get a better idea of what I want to do, because I look at certain things and I say, well, I don't know if that really speaks to me as much, because maybe the story structure is, maybe it's not about the structure necessarily. Sometimes I have a problem with television writing sometimes, but I won't go off on a tangent. Anyway, I think it's fascinating, and the more I learn, the more I want to create, and I love being able to go back and forth between different mediums of like live action and animation, because they always influence one another. It is a total one for one. In my mind, it's like one for one in terms of what you learn when you're doing the different types of films. Like, it all translates, and whenever I go back to a different project, I can feel the stuff I learned from other places sort of influencing it. So it's been great to learn about all the structure stuff, and I hope this was a good video. Thanks, Professor.